drinking whiskey or Cabernet. Let me get it, let's get drunk on a weekday. She said, I know I don't say enough, but I swear I love you and just want to buzz. She said, I don't know what to do if I didn't have you. I said, I think about that every night and every morning. I fall all over again and again, and you don't even know it. Baby, if you're wondering when you hold me, if I still feel forever only, every night and every morning. I can see us in 50 years, rocking pointed west, rocking chair. 'Cause baby, some love never fades. Baby, some things never change. Every night and every morning, I fall all over again and again, and you don't even know it. Baby, if you're wondering when you hold me, if I still feel forever only, every night and every morning.
Today, welcome to Inner Wellness. Inner Wellness is a 8-part series hosted by GRC's Pono program to center mental health and wellness from a native Hawaiian Pacific Islander lens. You can join us every Thursday from 12 p.m. to 1:30 as we explore inner wellness. Special shout out to our sponsors and the people who have made this series possible: GRC Pono program, Elevate Healing, New Hope Counseling, and King County Pacific Islander Task Force. Also want to give thanks to Voice of the South Pacific, a local island radio station focused on broadcasting the latest Pacifica, who has graciously agreed to stream our series for folks to tune in. Akondran. Finally, I want to thank our sister Anapisi institutions who are collaborating with us on this project. So shout out to North Seattle um, and any others I have missed. I apologize. My name is Leslie Finn, a she, her, and I am the Pono project coach. And I have the honor of serving as today's co-host for this session. Today's session will be focused on how anger is a secondary emotion and uncover the feelings behind it. So I'm going to pass it off to my other co-hosts to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Leslie. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you for joining us and for being with us this afternoon. My name is Sala. I am a licensed mental health therapist here in Washington. And so I see clients through my practice and then also do a lot of community work. We partner a lot with a lot of the nonprofits in the area, and then also with amazing Green River through Anapisi funding, just to be able to make these conversation available for our community. So today's conversation is always a really, really good one, just because I think like a lot of the times in our communities, we often don't talk about our feelings or our emotions. And so as Scarlett and we're kind of putting all of these conversations together for our community, we really wanted to kind of have like a foundation, just on like a level footing for everyone in our community to be able to like, come in, and then like we're all on the same understanding or knowledge about maybe what our feelings are, how to identify our feelings, what is therapy, like in our previous community conversation. So today's conversation is going to be a really, really good one. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions. We really appreciate it when everyone is just kind of like chiming in or leaving your comments. Let us know if you have any questions. Scarlett and I will just be sharing our stories like a lot. And so if you don't like engage with us, trust me, we can talk forever, but we would prefer that everyone just engage with us, hopefully, so that way we can have a good community conversation around today's topic of know your feelings. And Scarlett does a really, really great job of being able to facilitate this conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Scarlett so she can introduce herself and get us going in this community conversation.
Awesome, awesome. So I know it probably looked on the flyer that it said what's underneath your anger, but that's actually next week. So it was a slight misprint in the dates. But today we are talking about know your feelings because this is the base conversation that will lead into what's underneath your anger, which we will be running next week, I believe. So again, good afternoon, everyone at Green River, everyone on Facebook Live, and if you rewatch this, YouTube, Instagram, whatever, we just want to welcome you to today's community conversation on know your feelings. Such an exciting conversation that we always have in regards to know your feelings because it is something that is really not taught within our communities. But before I go any further, my name is Scarlett Ekaroma. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a boundaries coach. Been in this field for over a decade, and I currently work through my private practice, Elevate Healing. Not only do I get to do these amazing, do I see my amazing clients, but I get to do these amazing community conversations with my colleague, my partner in crime, Sala, and we have been doing these classes since October 2022, and it is such a joy to continue to teach our communities that's really not afforded to our communities unless you're seeing or paying for a class like this or seeing a licensed therapist. And here you have two licensed therapists, some more licensed therapists who want to help our communities know our feelings better. So with that being said, again, please keep all questions and comments relevant to today's community conversation. And we do want to honor everybody's time as well. So if you have any questions, you do not have to wait. If you have any comments, you do not have to wait. If you're in the Zoom room, unmute yourself. If you're in the GRC event center or in Facebook Live, please put your questions in the chat, or I'm not sure how to do it in the event center, but we'll just get them to us. So with that being said, I'm going to set myself up and then we will start from there.
And as Scarlett is doing that, if you take a look at the chat, we do have our post survey link that's there. And usually we would ask you to be able to complete that for us before you head out of today's community conversation, just because it really kind of helps us, lets us know maybe some feedback. We're very, very open to feedback. And then also it just helps us to kind of gauge where everyone's understanding is, or maybe even feedback for improvements for us as well. So don't forget to complete that before you head out after today's conversation.
For sure. Sala, can you see my screen? We're good? Awesome. So, one of the biggest things, like I said, why we wanted to have this type of community conversations is because anytime Sal and I would see somebody in our office, whether it didn't matter the age, whether you were young or older, there was a challenge or struggle in identifying, the clients would have identifying their feelings. And one of the first things that we teach about emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is what I saw was not really taught, in particularly in the US in the school system after a certain grade level. So typically after second grade, I would say, which you're about 7 or 8 years old. And what was sad about that, it doesn't address the complex feelings that we develop in each stage in life. And, and again, like I said a little bit earlier, unless you're attending a class like this or seeing a licensed therapist and paying for it, you don't really learn about the complexity of feelings unless, again, like you're attending something like this. But again, you have two licensed therapists who will help you navigate through all of this. So we felt it necessary to teach our communities feelings beyond what's taught in school, which typically in school you're taught about mad, sad, hungry, lonely, tired, or some variation of that. And our feelings go way beyond that. In the event summary, you will see, besides the summary, there's a feelings wheel that's included, and then there's a 50 ways to relax info sheet, and then you will see our info as well. So this is our agenda for today. So we're going to talk about your brain and your body, then all things pertaining to feelings. So of course, we always include our cultural piece. We're going to talk about the feelings, the importance of feelings. Then we're going to talk about a study, which includes 34,000, and we'll get to that number. and then the layers of feelings. And then lastly, we are going to share some tips. One of the things I love that Sala and I do in every community conversation, we talk about just tips that you can literally start using with immediacy. You do not have to wait to use them. So please, if you even have an additional tips that you would like to share, please don't hesitate to share those as well. All right, so we're going to watch a short video on your brain, body, and your feelings. We love giving education about how feelings interact within your body. So we will watch this short video, and then we will have a short discussion about it.
When we hear the word emotion, most of us think of love, hate, happiness, or fear. Those strong feelings we experience throughout life. Our emotions are the driving force behind many of our behaviors, helpful and unhelpful. Just where do our emotions come from? Our brain is wired to look for threats or rewards. If one is detected, the feeling region of the brain alerts us through the release of chemical messages. Emotions are the effect of these chemical messages traveling from our brain through the body. When our brain detects a potential threat, our brain releases the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol, which prepare us for a fight or flight response. When we detect or experience something rewarding, such as someone doing something nice for you, our brain releases dopamine, oxytocin, or serotonin. These are the chemicals that make us feel good and motivate us to continue on the task or behavior. In these instances, the feeling region of the brain kicks in before the thinking part. Sometimes the reactions of the feeling brain are so strong that it dominates our behaviors, and we're unable to think rationally in the moment. Our emotions hijack our brain. While many of our emotional responses happen subconsciously, our thinking can influence our emotions, and sometimes this can be unhelpful. Just thinking about something threatening can trigger an emotional response. This is where we can manage our emotions with conscious thinking. Our emotions play a powerful role in the way we experience the world. Understanding and regulating our emotions through our thoughts and behaviors can help us take greater control of our brain and achieve our goals.
Any questions, any comments about the video that was just played? And again, I'll say this, I didn't really learn about emotions and the in-depth of them till I was about 20, 28, 29, and I was in grad school by then. And so it's really interesting how this important information about ourselves and our bodies is not really taught to us in our school systems or just in general. And so this is why I love showing this video, because it shows truly how the emotional part of your brain can overtake when sometimes we just need the logical part of our brain, which is the front part of our brain. So any comments, any questions? And Sala, if you want to add anything, please go ahead.
I always like whenever you show this video, I really appreciate how they make the connection between the physical and the emotional, and how that goes hand in hand, right? Like whatever's going on with you, like physically in your body, like they can connect that like to your emotions. And it's so true. And I think one of the main things that always stands out to me from this video is just what is being released in our brains whenever we're experiencing things, right? So depending on what it is that we are experiencing, like if our bodies are experiencing a threat, right? Like if you're in a situation where you don't feel safe or you feel threatened, your brain is releasing that adrenaline, that cortisol in your brain. And then versus like what your brain releases whenever you are experiencing like, and I think we call this like your feel good chemicals, this is your serotonin, your oxytocin, your dopamine, so it's like it really all just connects. And I really like that they focused on that, on being able to make the connection, because like sometimes I think people just feel like, oh, your feelings is like one thing, but like doesn't really connect to the body. But it does, it very much does. Our body definitely connects with our emotional being.
For sure. Yeah, because one of the things that, because sometimes we don't feel like it's connected to our bodies, but not really recognizing like our emotions can um, come out physically in some way. Like we may feel a headache, we may feel a backache, and that's where you hold feelings sometimes. And so um, I just want to give space. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we go further? If not, I will go further. We good in all chats? Good. Awesome. All right, let's talk about my next favorite thing, culture. Love talking about culture because it's not talked about enough within, especially within our AA and HPI communities, because it's almost like how I'll say for me growing up, it was presented as it was a taboo thing. So I wanted to get some feedback from you all. How are feelings viewed within your culture and family, and what would happen if you shared? So just want to leave space for that. If you want to put it in the comments, in the uh, comments or the chat, please put in there. And if you want to, in the Zoom room, if you want to unmute, please share.
Mhm. I can go. I think like with culturally, I think one of the conversations that we had in this space last week was kind of navigating like the cultural stigmas, right, around mental health, things like that. And
Yeah.
so I think I showed like a model of like a Samoan guest house and where emotional well-being was being placed within that structure, and it was kind of placed in the back. You take something so symbolic to the Samoan community, which is Falsalmalo, and based on the research of Dr. Sayuli, it's like all of these things are key core, concepts in the Samoan community, but then you take like emotional well-being, and that's kind of in the back of the Falsalmalo, So I think that's very it really does show. Like I think that's what it is. That's the visual that when I think about feelings and how that's related to my culture, that's the visual that I see, because I think that really is represents well, like overall, like maybe how my own community perceives feelings, emotions, and things like that.
Yeah, I love that. I think like with um culturally, I would say for me growing up, you had to be quiet. You weren't allowed to talk about it. It was one of those, if something was going on or something was wrong, you don't tell anybody, so you just had to deal with it. Um, I think the other thing, what I learned growing up is that um, if I, as a woman and a Samoan woman who had feelings, it was a bad thing. Like it was very heavily frowned upon. And it was whatever I was labeled for having my feelings, it was highly negative, to say the least. So those, and Lord, if I shared, it just came with a lot of consequences. I'm gonna put it like that. And so it was not welcomed, is what I also learned. Like feelings were not welcome. And then as I learned in being a therapist, is that a lot of times what the feelings weren't welcome because one, it was uncomfortable, and it was just not known amongst my family. So that's the one thing I had to learn about, like, oh well, they can't know if they can't teach me if they don't know. So those were a couple of things that I learned about how feelings was viewed within my, growing up, and like what would happen if I shared. So anybody else want to share anything?
I can add if
Yeah.
I'm
Go ahead.
telling you, everyone, Scarlett and I would just keep talking,
It's
but
okay.
please share if you have anything you want to share or participate. But
Mhm,
because we will just keep talking, talking, because this is something that we're truly passionate about.
mhm,
But I want to add on. I think like when you're talking about like your own experience growing up, I think about how as a kid growing up, and my Samoan community and my family, it was almost like the adults were the only ones allowed to have feelings or to show
mhm.
and express their how they felt.
Yeah.
But kids weren't. Like as a kid, it's like I can't, like, if I'm mad, if I'm mad, I'm gonna keep it to myself, because the minute I, like, stomp my feet, or, like, say something or speak up or something like that, it was, yeah, we all know what's coming. But that was the impression that I felt like, was there. And I felt like that was, what was going on is, it's okay. And it was okay for adults to show and express how they felt. But for me, as a kid growing up, in my cultural context, it was like, no, you just be seen and not heard, type of thing,
Yeah.
and so I didn't feel like I was able to freely share, my thoughts, or freely share how I felt about something. Yeah. And I think about that, and I compare it to even how I am with my kids right now, and how I'm so like, oh, tell me how you feel, like, how are you doing like, just, I'm really open to hearing what my kids are feeling and thinking. I didn't have that, no, I didn't have that experience. So yeah, it was just interesting. And I thought about that when you were sharing your experience, Scarlett.
Thanks for sharing that. Go ahead, Martha.
Hello.
Hello.
First of all, thank you for this opportunity that we can be able to share these different feelings in regards to our culture. Um, I too am Samoan, and I can totally relate to you ladies in regards um, to be silent, even though they see you, but out of respect, we just stay quiet until spoken to. And so I would just want to share in regards to, I was raised in more Americanized versus my husband, straight off the canoe, in regards to Samoa, and I respect that. And so from what I was raised, my father was, when we meet as a family, he does give an opportunity for the kids to share on whatever topic it is. And so I was very thankful for that. But then with my husband, when I slowly started to get to know his way of being raised from his parents, and I had to learn fast. But at the same time, when we had our talks as a couple, I had to share with him that, yes, you're the head of the household, but we need to hear from our kids. You need to hear from me. Yes, I am your helper, but yet I am your spouse as well. And so I respect all that you are sharing with me, but our marriage is not going to work if we're going to go on the old ways of how our parents, what they knew.
Yeah.
And so in regards to just being married to another Samoan, but yet what I can say, it has improved a lot. Communication has gotten so much better. Our disagreements, in regards to, okay, it wasn't like how it was in our early years of newlyweds, where it's like, what did you say? I'm leaving. But it's gotten, I mean, what, 30 years now, 33 years now, it's to the point where we can disagree and be okay.
I
Right.
love
And
that.
if we need to have our me time, okay, that's okay. You need to have your me time, go. And I'll do do the same. And so I think in regards to feelings and culture, it's going to take time. At the same time, there needs to be an understanding
For
in
sure.
regards to that. So I just want to share that in regards to being married to a proud Samoan man.
I love
Fresh
that.
off the boat. That's how we are. That's fresh off the boat. Yes, that was me too. Thank you for sharing,
Thanks for
Martha.
sharing, Martha. Yeah, I think that's the one thing that, when we talk about culture is, a lot of times, and we talked a little bit about it last week, is it's like, what's the reason like we continue something that actually doesn't fit us anymore? So a lot of times when we hear about what feelings and culture, that, I think it's really amazing how the words or the notion of like it's a sign of weakness, that you're sharing your feelings. And, and here's the other thing. So I'm a crier. I cry at the like happiness, joy, sad things. And so, but at any point that I had cried, it was met with some viciousness. And it was because whoever, like my family growing up, it was very, very frowned upon because of the ideas that were given to them, because it was a sign of weakness at that time. And so, I just want to say that when you're sharing your feelings and or crying, it is not a sign of weakness. It takes so much bravery, strength, and courage to share what you're feeling and share your tears. Just like we give our positive feelings a space, we also have to give those not so great feelings and negative feelings a space as well. And in regards to like who comes up with this idea, what's the reason we continue it? Because a lot of times we continue something that we don't know really where or why or where it comes from, and sometimes we don't even challenge it, or if we should challenge it. So here's the only thing I always say about that in regards to culture: keep what works, and it's okay to add on. And just like Martha said, like they worked their stuff out to now they have like great communication now. So they had to come to that meeting place. And so I always talk about with culture, like everything Sala and I do, we're not replacing culture. We just want to add on to culture, like where we can talk about our feelings. We can cry and not feel like we're about to be berated. We can talk about mental health and it not be met with like awkward looks. That it can be received well. The other part, when we talk about feelings in our culture, a lot of regarding the culture, especially with our older generation, it's a lot of survival. There's a lot of survival thinking that happens because that's what was needed at the time that they grew up. So I mean, I think if we go back to not even what 1960s, 1950s, Samoa had just gained its independence from the other entity, from the worldly entities. So we're still talking about like gaining rights in wars and stuff like that. So those survivalistic thinkings that our parents have and grandparents have, yes, it does apply to them. But the other thing I always talk about is we got to give them grace as well, because they can't teach us what they don't know. So go ahead, Lilia.
Hi there. Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
think the survival part really, that was kind of like what I have been kind of just percolating just right now, thinking about it is like,
Yeah.
for me, like my father came to the States, from the military at like 17, and he came over. So like, first generation over here in the States, and like kind of what you're saying, like what would happen if you shared your feelings as a child? And it's like he didn't have time to really, deal with that. He was still supporting his family back home and still
Yeah.
to this day, so there's so many other competing things. And it's yeah, and I think as I got older, I realized that it wasn't necessarily malicious, it was just and it wasn't malicious. It is
Yeah.
those things that we learned. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I feel like a lot of our older, family don't, unfortunately, doesn't have that privilege to slow down and reassess these things.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. And I appreciate Martha sharing that, like, things are getting better, or that, that anybody sharing that our older family members can change. And I think it's good just
Yeah.
to hear that. So I appreciate those sharings. But yeah, I think the survival thing is really sticking out for me, that I see that thread, that fear has been woven through, for so long. So it's really hard to get through.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, Lilia, and thank you for sharing, because our older generation didn't know, and just like you said, they can learn. And I have to give a shout out again. I said this, I think I can't remember which class before, like, got to give a shout out to my father, who actually shares his feelings. Now, this is a man who grew up in the islands, okay? And it wasn't because I told him he had to share his feelings. I didn't say any of that. I decided to be different. I said, let me just share my feelings with my father, and we will just work through whatever he's uncomfortable with. And the first time my father ever called me to share his feelings, I was like, wait a minute, what is going on? It was such joy, because he started to recognize, like, okay, well, somebody else is doing it and there's safety in that. So maybe she can do that for me. And now he shares it with me, and I absolutely love and enjoy it. So yes, your parents can be taught, and they can change, if there's, and particularly if they want to change. So I just want to share that story of hope for those who are hoping their parents will share their feelings at some point. So, and then lastly is a lot of our culture was, you know, like we said a little bit earlier, was be quiet, stay silent, just be seen and not heard. And so we always, and when we work with clients, we always have to talk about what's the cost of being silent. There's such a massive cost for being silent when you don't share what's going on, like the physical aspects of it, the mental, the emotional, the behavioral aspects that all impact when we don't share what's going on within us. So, any other comments, any other questions that we have before I go forward? Are we good in the chat, Sala? Cool, cool. All right, so we're gonna watch another short video, and we're gonna talk about why we need to feel heard, because it's important. It's not just about sharing your feelings and knowing your feelings, but we have to know the significance of why we need to be heard as well. And then Sala, let me know if the video, if you hear it, okay?
Deeper than we even perhaps recognize day to day is that other people should acknowledge certain of our feelings. We want that at key moments, our sufferings should be understood, our anxieties noticed, and our sadness lent legitimacy. We don't want others necessarily to agree with all our feelings, but what we crave is that they at least validate them. When we are furious, we want another person to say, I can see that you've been driven to distraction. It must feel very chaotic for you inside right now. When we're sad, we want someone to say, I know you're unusually down, and I understand the reasons why. And when we can't take it all anymore, we want someone gently to utter, it's been too much for you, hasn't it? I recognize that so well. Of course it has. It all sounds desperately simple, and in a way it is. And yet how little of this emotional nectar of acknowledgement we ever in fact receive or gift to one another. The habit of not having one's feelings properly acknowledged begins in childhood. Parents, even the most loving ones, frequently stumble in this domain. It's not that they don't theoretically care intensely for their children. It's that they don't appreciate that true care involves regularly reflecting child's moods back to him or her, rather than subtly pushing the moods away or denying that they exist. Here are some typical unacknowledging parent-child exchanges. I'm feeling sad. Don't be silly, you can't be. It's the holidays. I'm really worried. Darling, now that's ridiculous. There's just nothing to be scared of here. I wish there wasn't any school ever. Don't be so silly. You know we have to leave the house by 8 o'clock in the morning. How different things might go, and what a different sort of adult the child would have a chance to grow into if such dialogues were only slightly tweaked. If, for example, the parent could say, it's weird, isn't it, how it's possible to be sad at the oddest of times, even on a lovely beach holiday? Or, I can see you're scared. That wind really is fierce out there. Or, it must be really horrible having double maths all morning, especially after such a nice weekend. There is one big reason why we don't acknowledge as we might: fear. The feelings we push away are all in some shape or other emotionally inconvenient or troubling or upsetting. We love our child so much, we don't want to imagine that they might be sad or worried, lost or having a terribly difficult time at school. Furthermore, we may operate with a background view that acknowledging a difficult feeling will make it far worse than it actually is. It will mean fostering it unduly or giving way to it entirely. We fear that if we give a bit of unbiased mirroring to our child, we might be encouraging them to grow cataclysmically depressive, unfeasibly timid, or manically resistant to authority. What we're missing is that most of us, once we've been heard, become far less rather than far more inclined to insist on the feelings we're beset by. The angry person gets less rather than more enraged once the depth of their frustration has been recognized. The rebellious child grows more, not less inclined to buckle down and do their homework once their feelings that they want to burn the school down, break the headmaster's glasses, and abscond to a desert island have been listened to and identified with for maybe no more than 55 seconds. Feelings get less strong, not more tyrannous, as soon as they've been given an airing. We become bullies when no one's listened, never because they've listened too much. Problem of unacknowledged feelings doesn't sadly end with childhood. Couples routinely put each other through the same mill. For example, sometimes I feel that you don't listen. That has to be rubbish. I put so much work into this relationship. I'm worried I might be fired. That's not possible. You work so hard. All the way to the divorce courts or an affair. The good news is that an enormous uplift in mood is available right now with very little effort. If we simply learn to change the way that we typically respond to the I statements of those who matter to us. We only need to play their feelings back to them, even the potentially awkward feelings, for a few moments using certain magical phrases. I can hear that you must be feeling so. I can understand completely that such phrases can change the course of lives. Crucially, we don't need to be listened to by everyone. We can bear an awful lot of unacknowledged feelings when just a few people, some of them in our childhood, and ideally one of them now in our bedroom and another in our friendship circle, every now and then plays us back to us. The ranter, the person animated by a rigid desire that everyone should listen to them, hasn't of course been overindulged. They're just playing out the frightening consequences of never having been heard when it mattered. There is almost no end to what we may be ready to do for those who pay us that immense, psychologically redemptive honor of once in a while acknowledging what we're actually feeling, however momentarily odd, melancholy, or inconvenient it might be.
Our emotional first aid kit.
Ooh, so I apologize about the sound because I forgot to share the sound. So that's on my end. I will do better at the next class. So just want to give space. Anybody have any comments or any questions about the video that was just shared?
Well, I always like the bit about giving your feelings just a little bit of airing.
Yeah.
That always stuck with me, especially like, what it said in the beginning, like whenever it comes to like, expressing our feelings, how we feel for the other person, right? Like our family members, our spouses, our partners, things like that. It's like you don't always have to agree with my feelings or how I'm feeling about stuff, but it's for me to, feel seen. All it takes is for like maybe my husband to acknowledge, oh, I can see that this is really making you feel upset. I can see that this is upsetting you. It makes me feel validated, and so as a therapist, I always see this in therapy as well with my clients where, they're having issues in like a relationship or something. And it's completely missed. Like this person is, kind of maybe venting about something, but then the other person's response is always like either like just their response is always like not in a way that is validating the person. So then it just ends up like making things even worse. And then from like my own personal experience, I remember a time when, I'm taking classes right now still. And I was just overwhelmed with classes one time, and I was just like, I have, this professor this professor that, and I was just had so much I wanted to share, right? So I come home, long day of school and work. I come home and I'm like venting to my husband about it, right? And my husband, I think like his main response was just like, he was like, oh, you should just do this. Just do this. He was like on his fix it Felix mode, like automatically he was like, oh, well, why didn't you do that? You should just do this, and that did not make me feel seen or validated. Like it did not make me feel heard. Like I think if I talked to my husband about this to where I'm like, all you needed to say was, oh, I'm so sorry. Seems like you had a really, really rough day. I would have been like, just melt it. I probably would have just melted and be like, I sure did have like a really, really bad day, because then it just felt like, like we're making a connection, like we're making an emotional connection. So whenever this video talks about how, how validating it is for someone just to acknowledge, how I'm feeling, or just by saying simple things like, I can see that this is really upsetting you. It goes a long way. I think about, like, if you were in our conversation last week too with the stigmas, I think we shared the funny clip, right, of the Samoan mom that was kind of role playing. But it was like, not being able to like acknowledge, because this can also be seen in relationships with your kids. Like, how often does your kids come up to you and they're trying to maybe tell you how they feel about things? Like, I'm feeling sad about this, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling angry about this. But then oftentimes we are kind of like minimizing how the kids are feeling, or just kind of like brushing the situation aside and not really giving it any airing, right? Versus if, as a parent, if my kid is coming up to me and talking to me about how they're feeling, how their day went, things like that, just a simple response of like, wow, I can see how this is really, really frustrating you right now. I can see how this is upsetting you in the moment. Like, it really validates things for them. So I think, like, one of the main things that I always take away from this video is, like, just give your feelings the space to be able to, like, to talk it out. Give your feelings some space. And that's what I always love about this video.
No, I love that you said that. And so, I mean, just for a story of transparency. So when teaching my son of feelings, one of the things that I had to um, make salute in myself was that, all right, the same space I give friends to share their feelings and what's going on, I have to give him that same space too. Like I can't not do it differently for him than I do for my friends. Like, I had to learn how to do that. The one thing that I love, what I always found interesting about the video was that, the impact of fear of why people don't share because of whatever the response that they may get back from somebody. This is why we're going to talk about emotionally safe people in this class as well. And it is true, when you do acknowledge your feelings and what is going on, it does not make it worse. It actually helps with relief. And so research shows that when you talk about whatever feeling that you're feeling, and particularly a negative one, that in this case, it reduces its intensity and it provides relief. It just does. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Somebody has their hand up. Go ahead, Una.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Yeah, my name is Sylvia. Aho. To me, like, as far as the sharing, like the feelings, it helps you. It will help me, process and release emotion, and you build a stronger relationship with others. And sometimes sharing feelings can help us think clearly and give others a sense of purpose and direction. And sometimes maybe they give you a little input or feedback, but
Absolutely.
otherwise, it may not always be what you wanted, but it's kind of helped, sometimes to hear what other people, wanted to share and give the feedback, to improve your mental health and also preventing you bottle up all the feelings and the emotions. Thank
For
you.
sure. Thanks, Auntie Sylvia. We appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, I mean, it's such, I, when my clients are able to share with me what is actually going on with them, and you can see the shift that happens. Even when somebody shares the feelings, you see it. You see the relief, like they're not as tense, they release. Even with family members or friends, you could see the intensity be removed from whatever they came in with. And so I just want to encourage you that, again, this releasing your feelings helps release stress hormones, which entail, I believe it said in the video as well, that it can improve and strengthen your immune system. It's always important to feel seen and feel heard and acknowledged. And again, talking about your feelings doesn't make it worse. Now, put this caveat also out there. It depends on who you're talking to, because not everybody needs to hear your feelings. Just put that out there, because you have to share with those who you deem emotionally safe. Go ahead, Martha.
Well, I was going to say also to that, it depends on, on who you're speaking to about what you're sharing. But it also, sometimes when my daughter would would start sharing, right? And then I'm sitting like a little behind my husband. And when she comes to a certain point of she's sharing a little too much, that, it could trigger my husband not feeling a certain way toward that sharing. And I'm stepping back, I'm like, giving her that, no, like, shh, enough, right? TMI or something. Because again, you got to know how much you can share, right? And there'll be a time you can share whatever it is, but it does, we as the person that's sharing, we have to be careful who we share, what we share, and who. And at the timing has to be the right time. I mean, mind you, there are times when we do get home and we're feeling a certain way and we can't help ourselves but just share whatever it is, how our day went. But I have to remind myself, okay, such and such, whoever's there at the house at the moment may not receive me in the way I want to be received. And so I need to be alert at times in regards to how I'm sharing. But in regards to sharing too much and to the person that you're talking to, I have to warn my daughter, like, girl, don't share too, don't share about that. You know how dad feels or what it, yada yada. But yeah, I just want to share that.
No, I love that you say that, because even when I have, like, if I feel something about that someone did something to me, one of the things I typically ask, I go, are you in a place to hear me share my feelings of what just happened? And they're like, oh. And because I had to learn just to not jump on them. That was a skill I had to learn, because I needed them to hear. And it's not just about hearing, it's about listening and receiving what I had to say. And if they didn't have a response, and then they would say, no, I'm not in a place, then I say, well, please let me know when you're ready, because this is something I would love to share with you. And then they typically would come back to me. And so, and again, just like you say, it's a time of place, and you also have to be in the space to whoever you're wanting to share with, to make sure they're in the place to hear you and listen, because listening is a skill that we do have to learn. And so that's the part where because if you're not being heard, things don't go well from there. And we are always essentially talking about, how do we teach people to treat us? And one of those in regards to feeling is, we have to feel safe in order to share our feelings. Any other comments before I go forward? And Saul, if you want to add anything, let me know. Good. All right. The other part, why it's important, it helps you and others understand you better. I have no idea what's going on with Sala if she doesn't tell me. I just don't. If she just says to me, I'm feeling this way, and then I'm like, and because what happened? So it helps you understand you, and you learn to find your voice when you are able to identify and know your feelings. Because when you are able to identify and know them, then you're able to share them and share the reason that you are feeling a certain way. Next is, they don't disappear if you don't talk about them, even though we think it doesn't. So it's a buildup. And what I typically say to my clients is, the more and more we have this makeshift internal closet, and the more and more you keep stuffing it in that closet, one day there's going to be no more room. And then it starts projecting out in negative behavior. So for example, some of the negative behaviors that you can exhibit is being silent, emotional eating, excessive anger, excessive sleeping, resentment, may have challenges with self-esteem, or depression and anxiety. So that's not an exhaustive list. And so those are just some things that can happen when you don't talk about what's going on within you. And then lastly is, you're not alone. A lot of times we don't share our feelings because we feel someone won't understand. We all have, and I'm grateful when I get to share stories, because people would typically be like, "Wait, that happened to you?" I go, "Yeah, this is how I felt about it." Because a lot of times we don't share. What I've come across in this practice, is that they feel like no one would understand because no one has experienced what they experienced, which is true. But the feelings are still very similar. So I just want to encourage you that you are never alone when it comes to however you're feeling. Questions, comments? Sal, if you want to add anything.
No, but just with the how it builds up, right? And again, making a connection back to that very, very first video that you shared about how, our emotions are definitely connected to our physical bodies. And so the more we are stuffing our emotions, like, and what this stuffing that we're talking about, or like just compounded, like, things that you're going through, is maybe you just experienced like a significant loss in your life, right? And you haven't really had time to process that loss, but maybe you're also having to go through a lot of changes at work, and you're pretty stressed out about that. And maybe at the same time, one of your best friends is going through something, and it's also, you have to give a lot of your energy to that person. And so it's like you're experiencing all of these different things that, like, you haven't really had the time to give space to. Like, I haven't really had the time to grieve, or just to be able to give space to my grief and experience this loss. But here comes something else on top of that. But I may just like, okay, I just got to keep moving. So I'm just, something else happens, and we're not talking about it. We just keep stuffing it. That's what we mean. Or we say, like, we keep suppressing how we're feeling just so that we can make it through the day. Right. And so it builds up. And sometimes, like, when we're talking about like how all of those things that, and you may feel like, it's just my emotions. Like, it's not going to really do anything. I'm just going to feel sad. But okay. But what you don't know is your body keeps the score. Your body keeps the score. There's actually a book about that. It's a really good one. So your body does keep the score, and it comes out in ways that, like, maybe you have high blood pressure. Maybe you are, and with the emotional eating behavior, well, now we're tapping into other medical concerns that you might have. So it shows up, maybe I'm constantly having headaches, so maybe I'm experiencing like a lot of, like, stomach issues at this point. So it shows up in our bodies. And in one of our conversations, we always say, like, research shows that in our AANHPI communities, we tend to exhibit a lot of, or we tend to express a lot of somatic symptoms. So I may not say like I, been experiencing depression, but I could go to a medical doctor and I could just, tell him about all of these physical symptoms that I'm experiencing. But then those are also physical symptoms that are tied to depression, right? So all of this stuff links up, and why it's so important that we just don't keep stuffing our emotional closet, but we're able to like find a way to have like that release, or to be able to, like what Scarlett mentioned earlier, find a safe space to be able to like have that release.
For sure. No, and I love that you said that, because I think one of the things that I have heard in inside and outside of the therapy office was, and in particular, I heard it from men where they said, "Well, I don't know why I should talk about my feelings. They don't matter anyways." And I'm like, that's not true. And so because of the research, because it does make you feel better. So it's just unfortunate that tends to be a notion that continues on, that your feelings are insignificant. That's not true. It's, again, we have to find those emotionally safe people in the emotionally safe support system who can truly support you and acknowledge you and make you feel seen and feel heard. Any other comments or questions before we go forward? And then, Sala, are we good in all chats? Awesome. All right, our 34,000. When I first came upon this, it's a research that was done by Robert Plutchkip. He's a psychologist, and he works on the theories of emotions. And what he talked about was that you can experience up to a combination of 34,000 emotions, and he broke it down into 27 categories. And when I saw that, I was like, that's a lot of combinations because, again, we're going beyond what we were taught in school: mad, sad, hungry, lonely, tired, because there's so many complex feelings after that. So when clients tell me, I don't know how I'm feeling, like, I believe you. Like, I absolutely believe you, because, and you're not alone in this, because this is why we are talking about, you got to give your feelings space. Good, bad, and indifferent. You have to give it space so you can identify what's going on within you. And we're talking about in why we're talking about knowing your feelings and sitting in with them and identifying them, because we want to help increase self-awareness so that you can share what's going on with someone else, so you can get the help that is needed. And then lastly, when we're talking about feelings, oh man, please give yourself grace. I'm very adamant about giving yourself, you have to give yourself grace. If you don't know what's going on, it's okay. You're learning and you're allowed to mess up. You're allowed not to know. And you got to give yourself the space to think about what's going on with you. The other thing I want to say in regards to, when you don't know how you're feeling, I want to encourage you to think beyond regards when somebody asks you, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How you're doing and how you're feeling cannot be summed up in 2 words. I'm good, which is typically what we hear. So when I hear that, I'm like, so say more. What else is going on? And they're like, oh, because it's giving them space to think about what else is going on with them. And so again, if you are not sure of how you're feeling, it's okay to say that. I don't really know how I'm feeling right now. And for people, for my close friends, they'll ask me, Scarlett, how are you doing? And I say, you know what? I don't really know. Let me look at my feelings wheel and I'm gonna call you back. And then I will truly get out a feelings wheel, look at how I'm feeling, and then go back and call them and say, all right, this is how I'm feeling and this is the reason for it. Even though I've been in this field for a while, I still use a feelings wheel because sometimes I just don't know what it is, and I have to use the resource that I know will help me out. So, any comments, any questions, Sal, if you want to add anything on that?
So also uploaded a feelings wheel in the chat for your reference, and then also with the we call it our little cheat sheet for every conversation that we have. So that's also in there if you want to download that and have that for your reference.
Yeah, I'm not ashamed to use a feelings wheel. Like I said, I've been in this field for over a decade. I still use a feelings wheel. So here's a tip that I would give, is to take a screenshot or take a photo of a feelings wheel and save it as one of your favorite photos, so that you can pull it up and reference it whenever needed. So I enjoy feelings wheel because when I first started learning about feelings and when I first saw feelings wheel, I said, that's a lot. So hence why Dr. Putskip said you can experience a combination of up to 34,000 feelings because you can feel them more than one feeling at once. Any comments, any questions before we go further? Good. All right. So this is the layer of feelings. So this is how I typically teach feelings to my clients. I call it the layers because you can experience more than one feeling at a time. So we have the surface feeling, then we have that middle layer, and then we have the root, which I would say is the root feeling is always the most important to address. The reason why I say that is because it is the one most likely we often ignore and don't address. So for example, I'm going to give you 2 examples of layers of feelings using surface, middle, and root. We'll do negative and positive. So for example, let's start off with negative. Surface feeling that we see or you can feel is anger. That middle layer may be annoyed or frustrated. The root feeling, which is again is what I feel is the most important to address. The root feeling may be hurt, dismissed, overlooked, unseen, or unheard. So this is why I always say when I work with clients, I said, can we address the root feeling so that we don't get to anger or we don't get to frustration or so we don't get to annoyance? And so that's the root because we often ignore that root feeling. Here's an example of positive feelings. So that surface may be excited, happy. The middle may be delighted, pleased. The root of that is secure, seen, heard, and loved. So that's how this is why it's important where I always talk about layers of feelings because you can experience more than one at one time. Questions, comments, Sal, if you want to add anything. Good. All right. So again, layers of feelings are always important. So if you feel like one of my clients, I'll never forget when that individual said, I was scared and angry. I didn't realize I could feel those things at the same time. I said, yeah, you can. And so we were able to talk about what it is was under that, which was the root of why that client was feeling angry and scared at the same time. All right. So these are tips of how to start sharing your feelings healthily. So tip number one, identify what makes you feel emotionally safe. So you want to think about all the characteristics that make you feel emotionally safe. So you want to think about tone, you want to think about language. Do you need a listening ear? Do you need advice? Do you need encouragement? Do you need softness? Do you need more assertiveness? Do you need directness? So I want you to think about all the things that make you feel emotionally safe. Because whatever makes me feel emotionally safe is not going to make someone else feel emotionally safe. Like for me, sometimes I just need directness. Some people don't like directness, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay. Sala, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to say something? Are you good?
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. I was putting the reminder for the post-class survey.
Okay. Gotcha. So again, identify what makes you feel emotionally safe. Again, some examples are you want to think about vocal tone, language. Do you need a listening ear, assertiveness, encouragement? Do you need silence? Do you need advice? So again, those are some things to think about when we talk about how to start, how do I, how to start sharing your feelings healthily. So one of them is what makes you feel emotionally safe? Next is use the feelings wheel. Again, you want to identify those surface root, those surface, middle, and root feelings. You know, it's important for you to identify and acknowledge, again, what's going on with you. So like I said, like we talked about, the importance of sharing your feelings is so that you can you can have some relief. So again, use a feelings wheel and identify your surface, middle, and root feelings. Write it down. Like either if you have your phone, you can write it in your phone. If you have a pen and paper, write that down as well. So because everything that is going on within you can be traced back to something. So this is why it's important to write down, especially when it comes to feelings, especially when we're starting to learn about it, to identify your surface, middle, and root feelings. And then next, identify what makes you feel emotionally safe. Contact your emotionally safe people first, not somebody who you think is emotionally safe. And I want to put it out there that sometimes it's not your family, and that's okay. Because I know sometimes the notion is we don't talk about what's going on with us outside of the family. And sometimes the family is maybe the one that's hurting us. So I want to encourage you that if it's not your family, it's okay. It's absolutely okay. So again, it's those same characteristics. Who makes me feel emotionally safe? Who can I know I can call on, and then I know they will hear me, not feel judged. I know they will help me out in whatever capacity I need help in. So again, you want to identify who makes you feel emotionally safe. Go to them first, and if you don't go to anybody else, that's okay. Like everybody doesn't need to know, everybody doesn't need to what's going on with you. You want to go to, again, to those who are emotionally safe for you. Next, journal your feelings. I am an avid journal person. I love journaling. Journaling helps with relief. Again, these are just some tips that you don't have to journal, but I always say in regards to journaling, like if you write them down, you don't have to write like a passage. You can, if you want, you can write a list, you can write ideas, a thought web, you can write, I've done scribbles, and I've like literally colored my scribbles, literally just scribbled. And I'm like, all right, what does this mean? And so you can also video blog, video or audio blog. You can use art. The purpose of journaling your feelings is really just to give it a space. Again, we're all about, you got to give yourself space, regardless of what it is. Just like we're excited to share our positive feelings or what happened that happened to us, we also have to give the same energy to our negative feelings. Because we have to give it space so that we can let it go, or so it can provide relief as well. And then lastly, take a break. Take a break from your feelings. That's okay if you take a break. Now, notice I did not say ignore. I'd ignore. Okay. Take a break, come back, and address what you took a break from. Because otherwise, as we said earlier, if we don't address them, they project out negatively. They can be emotional eating, mad at something, at the world, when it was the world who didn't do anything. And I'll even say, like, so one of the things I've gotten really good at. And so if my son comes home and he needs something from me, and I say, and I'm mad at something, I will say to him, I'm upset at something that you didn't do. Give me like 10 minutes and then I'll come back to you. And he's like, oh, okay, mom. So I had to give myself that space. So I had to take a break from whatever it is that he was saying, and give myself that space, because again, you will either project onto yourself negatively, or someone else, or any other area in your life. And again, take a break, not ignore, okay? And come back to whatever you need to address. And again, write it down, talk to your emotionally safe people, use the feelings wheel. Those are all things that you can utilize in regards to, when we talk about knowing your feelings. So, Sala, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, I was wondering if you could share an experience, especially like, like we spent a good amount of time like talking about like how in our communities, especially like collectivistic communities, like talking about our feelings is really not something that we are prone to do. It's not really something that we're used to, right? We didn't have parents that, well, some of us can speak for everybody, didn't have parents that like kind of sat us down and be like, well, sweetie, that, what you are experiencing right now is anger, and whenever you feel this way, like here are some things that we can try. Let's do some deep breathing. Like, didn't have that experience, and most really of like people in our communities, right? So I think like I was wondering if you can maybe share your experience as a therapist in working maybe with someone from our community, that where you really have to like had to guide them through like from the beginning, as far as like using the feelings wheel. Because like I think in our very very first conversation about what is therapy, and we showed that short clip of how some people in our communities are kind of like, we don't even have words to describe some of these things that we're feeling in our emotions, right? So I was wondering if you can share an experience maybe with in as a therapist, of maybe how you helped someone from our community sort of navigate through through identifying their feelings, using the feelings wheel. How did that work for them? Can you
Yeah,
speak a little bit more about that?
for sure. So and that's our last slide. I'm going to stop sharing. Um, and so I, one of the, I'll never forget. It was one of my first Samoan families that I got to see, and I got to see the mother. And um, one of the coolest things was again teaching her about feelings, because of course she just knew anger. She just knew
Hmm.
anger. She was tired, and, and that's all she knew. So when I pulled out the feelings wheel, she was just amazed. She was like, "What is all this?" I go, "So welcome to the feelings wheel. This is what this is." And I talked about the significance of why. The 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 really cool thing about it was when we looked at the feelings wheel, a lot of the words she just never heard of. So we had to get out the dictionary and define what the words were, and so like reluctant, like she didn't know what reluctant, and I was just like, okay, well, let's look up. And I said, all right, let's look at the definition. And then we talked about how does reluctancy show up for you, what does that look like for you, and she's able to connect those things. And so it's really a lot of the language that we have to teach, that I end up teaching a client, especially in our AA NHPI community. And then for a while, probably for like I want to say 2.5 to 3 months, one of the first things we did in every session, all right, pull out your feelings wheel, tell me what's going on. Because she would typically come in, "Oh, I don't know what's going on, I don't know how I've been feeling." I said, all right, let's pull out the wheel. And then immediately she's able to identify, this is all has what's been going on with me. This is the reason what's been going on. I'm this, and that. And so that's the part that we have to get, I had to get her comfortable with her own feelings, because if she wasn't, I'm not sure therapy would have went well for her. Because the great thing about it, when I got her to do well for herself and identify her feelings, then she was able to teach her kids. She was able to teach her kids to talk about, and because she was so uncomfortable with feelings, she just didn't talk about it at all. And so if any child of hers presented a feeling, it was met with anger, or it was met with dismissiveness. But she didn't realize she was dismissing, you know, her children. She was just like, oh, we just don't talk about it, but not really recognizing that is dismissive. And so really just a lot of digging and psychoeducation about what actually feelings and the importance of it, and just really doing that root work with her, because even talking with her about like how she handled her feelings, and she didn't recognize that she was handling her feelings in a certain way as a child when she was growing up in Samoa. You know, she didn't realize when she would become angry, or that she was going to smoking early, or she was drinking early. She didn't realize that she was hiding her feelings in that sense. She was just like, oh, I mean, that's just how we dealt with it. But then I said, but do you recognize that you were ignoring what was going on inside of you? She now knew that, and then she recognized that she didn't have anybody safe to talk to growing up, that she didn't, you know, and it wasn't a known thing to talk about her feelings, and because she was met with violence, either physically or verbal violence, when she talked about what was going on with her. And then it was just like, well, why are you angry? And I'm like, well, you had reasons to be. So now we were able to talk about what is it, how do we, in particularly for anger, it's just like with her, when it came to feelings, when we got to that root of it, it was really, she was uncomfortable. She was really uncomfortable talking about her feelings because it was not known. It was just something, it was taboo to talk about, you know. And then a lot of what I had to work with her on, in particularly, that she was allowed to give herself permission to cry. She would not cry. She just was, and I just said, what is that attached to? And so that was the work that we continued to do, to where, because the first time she cried in session without me telling her it's okay to cry, it was a huge win. It was a huge win for her, because she was giving herself the permission to let go and not hold on anymore. So I love that she did that for herself. So thanks for
Yeah.
asking that, Shell. That's really good.
Yeah, because I know that like you and I have like so much experience in like, you know, or that we can share in regards to
Mhm.
helping our community members like be able to process how their feelings, right?
Yeah.
And I also think about like our young people, our youth, and how oftentimes what we see in our office are, you know, are young men that are being, you know, ushered into therapy or other resources for bad behavior, right?
Yeah.
Or the school is labeling it as, oh, it's, you know, they're acting up, they are, you know, bad behavior. But when they sit across from us in our office, we really, what we're working with is what Scarlett has shared earlier, right? Is we're peeling back the layers with,
Yeah.
you know, like, okay, so the topsoil, what is showing up in that topsoil is maybe the bad behavior, is the, you
Yeah.
know, disrespectful, whatever. That's the topsoil. But when we're really taking the time to sit across from people, we get to like, okay, let's dig a little bit and let's peel the onion layers back, and we get to the bottom of it. Come to find out, oh, somebody from your family passed away. Oh, and then like 3 weeks later, someone else from your family passed away. So you're like two significant losses
Yeah.
on top of, you know, whatever else is going on in this kid's life. But like nobody is being able to like get to that point, right? Nobody is getting to the core, nobody's getting to the root cause of maybe what is showing up in the top and on the top soil. And this is why it's so important when we say like we have these conversations around really understanding, especially in our communities, like, because one, maybe we don't have words for it, and two, there's just like it's not really something that we do, and we don't really feel comfortable. So it's still taboo to talk about our feelings,
Yeah.
but it's so important that we do, because as PI clinicians, PI therapists, so many of our community are suffering in silence. And by the time they sit across from us, you know, they are just like severely going through things. And we're like, okay. And then as we're working with them, it's like, oh gosh, like we can't even go right into the treatment of depression. We really have to start with the psychoeducation piece of depression, and that is basically the know your feelings. Like this kid doesn't even know how to even describe all of these big things that they're feeling on the inside. So let's give this kid some vocabulary to be
For
able to
sure.
like express what's going on inside, right? So a lot of this stuff may seem basic, but really as a therapist, I know that we have a lot of of experience in being able to like, oh gosh, like let's gauge where this person's at as far as like understanding their emotions and things like that, or not. And then so we'd have to go all the way down to the basic and do like psychoeducation on feelings and using the feelings wheel and all of these things, right? Just to give them some understanding or basic knowledge on it. I wanted, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, because even with, I work with our elders, and they don't know about feelings, because they weren't, like I said, a lot of survivalistic things that happen. And one of the coolest things that Sala and I got to do last year was to teach our elders about mental health. And it's amazing just the information that they just didn't know about. And even we talked a little bit about anger, which we will get into our next class next week. They just didn't know that there was things under that. They didn't know that there was something else that they could be feeling. They were just like, it's just anger. And I'm like, but there's more under that. So I think that's the importance about like truly knowing it's sitting with, giving yourself space about feelings, because we in this, especially in the United States, it's about just go, 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 just keep moving forward. But I always say it's okay to sit back and relax and think about, okay, man, let me check in with myself, see how I'm doing. Let me check in, like, what did I feel today and what's the reason for that? And one of the things I always talk about with my child is just like, tell me what happened today in regards to how did you feel about whatever, the good and the bad, and we can talk through it. And so it, even for my child to come to me and say, Mom, I got to tell you about something that happened today that I didn't like. I'm like, oh, okay. What happened? And so, and I know and I know he felt comfortable with that because I worked on my own stuff in regards to however I was feeling about negative feelings, because that wasn't for me to pass on to him, is for me to hold and work through it. And so that I could be something different for him, for sure. So I didn't want to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that goes right in line with what I was going to share about our elders as well. And if I remember from that session that we had with our elders, with the elders in our community, is this lady was saying like, no, I just get angry. That's what she said. She's like, no, I just get angry. And we try to like help her peel back the layers, like, oh, well, what was happening before that? And she's like, I don't know. I just, I get angry all the time and it just happened, And so, and it's just like, it'll take time to be able to like help them understand, well, before you get to anger, like this probably happened and this happened. And it's a buildup of emotions before you get to that point where it's like, it just becomes like, okay, I'm angry. So even just helping our community members understand that. But just another quick short story. I know we're coming up on time, but I was working with one of our Samoan elders in our community, and I remember having to, when she was describing what she was going through, I immediately knew. I was like, okay, symptoms of this is all depression. This is what she's experiencing. And so, but before I can even tell her about depression, right? I'd have to like really let her know, because it's in the Samoan language. I'd have to say a whole thing, right? It's like, oh, mafafonga mamafa, things like that. And I'd have to like really explain it to her. It's not just a simple like word, depression.
Yeah.
So it's like having to bridge that gap, having to like help her understand like what this word means in our native language, and then explaining all of these things to her, like giving verbiage, right? I think it was one of those moments I'll never forget, because as I'm explaining these things to her in our native language, and like kind of helping her understand her feelings, her emotions, and why she's thinking the way she's thinking about things, and how she's thinking, and how her thoughts are affecting her emotions, and how that all ties in together. As I'm explaining these things to her, it was like I could literally see the light bulb kind of go on in her mind, because then she was like, that makes so much sense. I just thought there's something wrong with me. I just thought that, like, I just didn't know. She's like, I don't even know what I'm feeling, but like, I know I'm like sad all the time, and I'm, this is what's happening, this is what's happening. So it's like, it's being able to like really help our community. And I know, like, sometimes even having this conversation of like, know your feelings for people that are well versed in their emotions. This is like, oh, this is like something that, like, anyone, like, in our communities, this is the foundation that we need to be able to like communicate, right? This is the foundation that we need to provide to our community, because in order for us to talk about trauma, in order for us to talk about suicidal ideations, in order for us to talk about bipolar, schizophrenia, we have to know the basic. We have to figure out like what, our feelings are before we even have those really difficult conversations about those complex things. So yeah, just that last piece I wanted to add on there.
No,
But
it's
yeah.
good. No, that's good because it's like I said, I know this is one of the reasons why Sala and I wanted to do this type of class, because it's not talked about in our community. It's often ignored. And so our big thing was when Sala and I got together was to come up with topics that are usually talked to us in private, and we had to bring it to the forefront. And we know that it can be uncomfortable to talk about your feelings just in general, just to even bring up the topic. It's very taboo. And it's like, well, no, but it's not taboo. And let's not continue what we heard, and actually let's sit and challenge, like, well, I know what happens if I don't talk about it. And so, like, one of the things that it talked about emotional eating in there, I was a highly emotional eater. I would just be quiet and eat my feelings. But then I had to recognize that actually wasn't it, like, helping at all. Like, when Charlotte talking about medical issues, your girl had medical issues, okay? And so I had to recognize I have to do differently. Like, I can't keep going towards this thing that is keeping me silent. I got to talk about my feelings and what is going on with me, because otherwise it's not going to be better for especially now that I had my child at that time. It's not going to be better for him, and I have to do differently and better for him by doing differently and better for myself. Because regardless of what I learned growing up, I said, all right, that's what I learned. I'm going to take what worked for me in regards to feelings. Now I need to add on to it and do what actually works for me and figure this out and learn more. So that was me becoming a therapist and going to therapy as well. So we got about 10 minutes. I wanted to give the floor to you all. Please utilize this time while you have Sala and I here to ask us any questions in regards to today's topic. And Sala, let me know if there's anything in the chats, and if there's anything that you all want to share, please share. And so I got your messages in the chat. Thank you so much for that. And we will continue to hold these spaces for our people and get more comfortable with this. And so even I remember I'll say this real quickly. I remember one of the Pacific Island males, he came to one of our first classes, and he was just like, man, I didn't know any of this. I said, yeah, why we do these classes. And that's what, and he was, and I, even when Sal and I, we were fortunate to teach to a women's group, and there was one of the husbands was in the women's group, and I believe we were teaching Know Your Feelings, and he says, why are these classes for our men? Like, our men need this. Like, we need you guys to come and teach our men, because again, it's just not talked about in our communities at all. And we want to be the conduits of change, to be like, nope, this is what it is. We're going to stop hiding behind it and not talking about it, and we're going to talk about it. So just want to give space. And then Leslie, if there's any questions, I don't know if there's anybody sent you any questions, but let me know that as well. So thanks, Martha. And please invite people. So that's your assignment. Bring one person. You don't got to bring 50 billion. Just bring one other person to our class next week, which next week we will talk about what's underneath your anger. Go ahead, Auntie Sylvia.
Hi, I just wanted to ask a little quick question. Something about like, how do you really know your true feelings?
No, I think it's a good question. I think utilizing the feelings wheel is a good start. It's because I think knowing, because like I said, I think knowing the definitions of what the feelings are important, and so it's something that here's what I'm gonna say. It's something that you would have to truly sit with and be like, all right, does this, whatever the definition I looked up of whatever word it is, does that apply to me? And so, and that's the thing. when you sit with your feelings, sometimes you can't figure it out like in that moment. Sometimes you may figure it out a couple of days later. It's okay. Like it's okay that you don't figure it out right then and there. So that's what we're talking about. Giving yourself space. Giving yourself space does not mean give yourself a time limit. No. Give yourself the space to think about what's going on. Go ahead,
Yes.
and Sylvia.
No, thank you. I think you answered that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like I said, because all the time, because we never want to talk about we limiting. Oftentimes we think of something when we think of space, it's like, all right, I have to think about it right now at this moment, this hour. No, give yourself the space. Space is opens time. That means time as well. Give yourself the time space, the mental space, the physical space, the emotional space to think
Right.
about what is truly going on with you. Because we don't give ourselves enough space for ourselves. We're always doing something for work, for the kids, for the family, for the
Yeah.
love love is whatever it is. But you got to give yourself space. And I'll say for me personally, if I don't have that, give myself that space, I don't really function well. I just don't, because I'm so used to giving myself space now that I have to give myself time. And it's even telling people, hey, I just need a little space right now. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk. It's okay. Like, it's okay. You get to ask for what you want. You get to ask for what you want. Okay. And I love talking about these things because we're always taught to do for others, but not really talking about how do we do for ourselves so that we can still continue to stay replenished. One of the analogies I always give is that I have given before is that you must fill your cup up. The overflow is for everybody else. If you don't fill your cup up, you will continue to give at a depletion and a deficit, and then you're coming in, and then whatever else projects onto that. So you yourself must always fill your cup up. Filling your cup up is identifying and knowing your feelings and sitting with it and giving yourself space.
Yeah, I have another one.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go
that
ahead.
we just lost two young people, one in the early 40s and
Mm,
one in the late 30s. So those two funeral, one is next week and one is the following week.
mhm,
So they are coming from a very good family, a good, very good family support. But what are
mhm,
some of the things, that maybe help them to ways to know their feelings, better for the teenage or the,
mhm,
growing up generation. Even I have a son, he's 28. I'm trying to understand,
mhm.
him.
I think one of the things you can do is really encourage them not to ignore their feelings,
Right.
because it's really easy to ignore, especially when grief comes into play. So you really want to say, hey, just want to put it out there. I don't want you to ignore what's going on with you, even
Exactly.
after everything has settled down. Because really, after everything has settled down, then we're starting to feel stuff. But then we quickly go to something so we can ignore what we're feeling. Like I said, take a break, don't ignore. It's two different things. So I would just say, don't ignore it, and
Don't
give it
ignore.
and encourage them to use the feelings wheel. There's so much that happens that we experience. I know grief is something that we don't really talk about, because that the thing about with grief is that grief is a forever thing. It is a life change that happened. And when we talk about somebody who transitioned away, especially at a young age, especially if it was unexpected. So really, I would say to Sylvia is to inform them not to ignore their feelings, and to find somebody who, like I said, is emotionally safe, that they can talk to about what's going on in regards to those who have passed away.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So, got about 5 more minutes. Any other questions? Anybody want to share? I love having these conversations. Go ahead, Leslie.
The part earlier where it was mentioned about like identifying people who make you feel emotionally safe, that
Mhm.
resonated for me because like in that moment I was thinking at least in like a work setting, like who are coworkers that um
For sure.
like for that for me, and
Mhm.
also just in my personal life. So I really appreciate that mention.
Yeah, and we always have to put, and thanks for sharing that, Leslie, because we always had to put those caveats because I know, like I know the message I got growing up, you don't keep it outside the family. You keep it in. You keep it quiet. Whatever's going on, whatever you're feeling, keep it in here. But that didn't apply to me as I got older. It didn't work. And so I had to really sit with like, who are the people I can go to, who I know I can lean on in the moment and help me through whatever I need to navigate through, because it is important that you have emotionally safe people. And if it's not your parents, it's okay. Like it's okay. Like it's okay. It's not them. And just like we talked about a little bit earlier, it's like you have to know who they are, what to say to certain people, what not to say, just like what Martha was sharing with her daughter. You just have to know, but who, and we're talking about sharing like deep emotions, you just have to know who those emotionally safe people are. And if it's not a family member, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong. And even when it comes to work, like you said, Leslie, you just got to know who those emotionally safe people are, who you don't feel like you have to look over your shoulder and make sure that you feel emotionally safe in the workspace as well. Comments, questions? Sala, anything you want to add before I close this out?
Nope, good to go.
Cool. So thank you again for everyone for joining today's community conversation, Know Your Feelings. And if you're rewatching this, please send your questions in. If you go home today and you say, man, I wish I would have had a question for Scarlett and Sala, still please send it in. We will answer the questions because that's what we love to do. We want to be a conduit of information and help for our community in any capacity that we can. Please tune in next week to our another community conversation about what's underneath your anger. I love another one of my favorite classes, and we will get into why anger is not the issue. So we thank you. We appreciate you. Again, we always have to thank our sponsors, Green River, Anapeasy, King County, for continuing to allow us to do these community conversations for our communities, because we find it very, very important. So that being said, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate you. Leslie, I will turn it over to you so you can officially close us out.
Thank you so much for that. Any just last minute words, I'll say thank you again to our sponsors and collaborators for this project. We'll catch you next week on Inner Wellness. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Budan Lata. Koe mea whaike na o lata, koe ahoni o ko kamatai ahono apo e whahoko ia i he Barney Wetchan ko ia i Dash Point Road. Tō lahi whoki a ki nau tau nau maheni ange pē i o nganga maheni i he Barney Wetchan ko ni malapa apuna. Ka koe tua sila koe ni, koe Barney Wetchan pē moia koe whare mate o tu i Federal Way i he Dash Point Road. Tahanima Tolnima, Southwest Dash Point Road i Federal Way. whaingo fua o pito pe ko alpo afe tes point o lele ai pe ko o alua ke pe o alu he tau tahawa pa tau noa walu o maua tuki ai tuasila koini o kuofi au pito pe. Pea kamata pe taimi ni ma ai fiafi o lele ki tataha po. Koe koe pongpongi koe whalai te ia o ku whahoko ai misa whamawai ko ia o e pekia o lata i vai lahi e wha. Kamata pe ia i he taimi tataha ki he taimi tahawa. Koe na mo mea mai peki ai, pea koe apsiasi pe na St. Philomena Church i hala wo wanoa. Ai a kuofi au pito pe ai toa sila koe na ki he whare lotu i he ua taha ono, pe koe Safeway ko ia i he Pacific Highway i he ua taha ono. Ko e te awhia tu peki ai, whakawe site pa te ulaki he maa pe ai o mawai wo wanoa. Ka whaingo fua au pito pe. Lava peke mo mae wo wanoa me Pacific Highway o alohanga tono e peki ai ki he whare lotu. Pea osko ia to e wha ha ere ai pe ai sino e peki ai ki he whaitoka ko ia ki Bonnie Wetchen aina tu pe kona i mala ve tawhaaki o i mala whakapuna. Ko e mea whakaeki e taha ko e whoha koe ni ko tō tau ko Robbie Heffer. Ko Robbie Heffer ko ene o ngā mātu a ko tūholo Heffer. Pea pehe ki a lere noa Heffer ko ne mama o atu. Ko e māloloen a Robbie i hono tau whangofulu mā wha. Pea o ko te waki atu a e whamiri ke whahoko a hono misa i he whafofua ki he taimi hi wātou noa ki hongo fulu, ke osi pe i he tātaha, pea whai ai pe ahono whahaele i ato e mea whaeki ki he whaitoka. Aia ko Gethsemane. Aia ko e aho whalai te ia o i wike kaha o. Aia ko e aho wani maia. Aho wani maia o i mahina ni. Aia kamata pe me taimi hi wāpongpongi, mahalo o au ki he tātaha ko osi. Ai polkalama, ai whahae lewa ki he whaitoka. Pea oku iai pe ai whakarea mai pa me he whae koe ni whae o whaanga ko ia ai pekia a Robbie he wha, ai ko tuhulu he wha, ko i wha amu pe, kai ke toi whaka amu ke toi wha ngosia e hataha, kai ke toi whie mau ha mea. Ko mo ha mai pe koe hoko ia koe vai whanonga pe koe whakawhie maarie mo kore tu pe ho mo ngai loto whekina kai ore wake au ki taimi ke whaia au no whakai ka o ko i kai ke te whie mau ha mea ki he mea koe ni alopi pe koe ke te whaha whai lotu koe tok whai pe au no misa ke whare lotu katolika ai ai St. Edwards ko ia i hala Oka Street ko ia o ku whaafai a ngā lotu peki ai palokia tonga ko ia isas katolika. Ai ko Robbie Heffer ia. Whalai te ia ui ke kaha u, ka mata pongpongi pe me hiwa oski e tātaha, ka te waki au no whaha ere ki hono whaitoka, ki hono api no whaanga mau. Pea ko e kore mai pe e he whae, tō holo Heffer, whamore more, kai ke toi whie mau ha mea. Ko e mālo api tō mō ofa, ko iai pe ha mō ofa, ko rea pe ho mō lotu, pe ka pau pe ukiaki matala kau ko i kai, ko e whie mau pe, mō mai pe tau whi loaki, pe ko e hoko pe ia, ko e tāpuaki mo e vai whanonga. Whakaosi, aia ko tuku mai whoki e he whamiri ko ia o keremete vaha ilui. Ko e pekian a keremete vaha ilui aina iloa pe ko vahai I hono tau tolongo fulma valu. Pea o te waki pe ke whai a hono mea whaka eiki. Aia koe apo ka mata pe e Novema aho wā. Aia koe aho sāpate ia I taimi o noe fiafi. Lere ai pe o nau alo ai pe ai o apo ai pe ki he aho. Nau tuwange ngai whainga mari koe hai pe hataha. Kau mai koe o mai pe o whai manat me rie whai pe moe ofa. O whakaata pe ki hataha pe. Ai ko Novema aho wā ia. Koe wike ki tu aia. Novema aho wā koe aho togonaki. Pea kamata pe e taimi o noe fiafi. Ai apo o mea whaka eiki o keremete vaha I lui. Pea a orewa ke pongi pongi ko ia o e sāpate. Aia ko Novema aho tolu ia. E kamata rewa aho no malangai. O awe rewa ki hono whaitoka I taimi tahataha pongi pongi. Pea mau teu pe ai mea tokoni. Pea moe ki whakati ke whai pe aho no whakakakato atua ki mo tolu, mo whea maa, a mo hina vai, pe koha mea tokoni, o lava kakato pe mau whakakakato mea kotoa pe ke toa takotoa pe, o mo wau mai. O ha pe ha mo ofa, mau tari loto whea maari e pe. Ka o whahoko katoa pe ai o wau o mea wha eki, o keremete vaha I lui, e Bonnie Wetchen pe koina, funeral home, aina I whaitoka koini I he tawhaaki pe koia o malai whakapuna. Ai ko tu asilai pe ko taha ono Whawhanima, International Boulevard I SeaTac, Washington, hiva valu taha valvalu. So the service for Kelemete vaha I lui at Bonnie Wetchen Funeral Home, right next to the SeaTac International Airport, but most of you are all familiar with this Bonnie Wetchen Funeral Home at 16445 International Boulevard, SeaTac, Washington, 98188. It will be on November 2nd, all night, start at 6 p.m. And that is the traditional Tongan funeral called Apo. And November 3rd, that is a Sunday, 11 o'clock a.m., and then follow to his final resting place at his burial site. There will be like food served, pastries, coffee, tea, everything, for all of you that needed it. Ka paurewa o kia ha mo whewhetutaki mai, pa mo whetutaki mai pe koe whika telefoni, koe ua noa ono, tolu wal tolu, taha nima hiba nima, tolu wal tolu, taha nima hiba nima. Hange pe koe ian a kamatatu, koe poni, koe mea whaka eiki ne tolu I he wahengani. Kamatatu pe he wikeni, mea whaka eiki koe ia o lata hefa, amina ke whai ahono apo, I he whiawhini, I he Bonnie Wetchen Funeral Home, koe ia I Federal Way. I Federal Way, pea koe peki aini, a lata I wailahi hefa I hono ta ni mga fulmahi wa. Nane mau hoa foki ki a lai moana hefa. Ia ena whanau e toko nima. Pea o tatau mai ai toko tahani. O ne foki ki api o malolo ki ai. Pea koe ngahi polo kalama katoa pena mau tuku katoa ai whakaiki ki e ata. Bonnie Wetchen I Dash Point Road ko ia I Federal Way o apo ai mea whaiki ka matahini mai whiawhi o tuku ke tataha. Pea os ko ia koe aho ko ia a pongpongi o whai ai aho no misa I he St. Philomena Church ko ia I Des Moines, Washington. Me he taim tataha ke tahawa. Pea whaha ere ai pe ke whai toka ko ia koe Bonnie Wetchen I he International Boulevard koe na I SeaTac o whai ai o wau whakaosi. Koe mea whakaiki ko ia o Robbie Hefa. E toki whahoko ia I he whalaite ko ia o I wiki kaha u. Aia koe whahoko ia I he whalelotu ko ia St. Edwards I he Oka Street. Aia whawhai anga lotu peki ai palokia tonga sas katolika. Pea koia koi kore mai pe me he fa e o fanga fa more pe ko i lo pe ka ka hamo ofa mo ka taki lotu mai pe ma u fekina mai ai te waki o e fa ma po po kai fa e fa ke he ka o fa lau a ropi he fa ai ka ni peki ani ona ta fa ma fa pe ka mata pe me tai mi va pongpongi i St. Edward's e falaite ko e ahua ni mai o katopa i wiki ka ha u pea i he aho ua ko ia o Novema ai ko wiki ki tu a ia e whai ai ai a pō ko ia o e mea whaka eiki o kere mete mahai lui ai i he whare mate pe ko ia i Bonnie Wetchen ko ina i he veta whaaki mala wakapuna i he Pacific Highway South whare mate ko ia kamata pe taimi o noi fiafi i he tokonaki ia o wiki ki tua ai ako Novema aho waia o lere ai pe ki he aho Novema aho tolu taimi taha pongpongi to a pongpong sapate ko e te waki le vai ia ke whai aho no whakai ke ka ki ono api no whaanga mau i he whai toka i pe ko ia ko e Bonnie Wetchen i Malawapuna taha ono whawhanima International Boulevard ko ia te ngata he ko lava tu watu pe kai pe mo loto fu fekina tu e taim fa ngata a ko ni mau ilo kai ka me fa ngofua ai ma vai mo ngai o fa anga kai ta te vito ke si fa e ko ni ko lata ne more atu kai no fo ai ki fa na pa ya mau o fa la ya to lai mo na he fa kai pe ke ki fa na pa ya e taim fa ngata a ko ni ko loto pe mo hu fa ki pehe peke mea wha eki ko ia o Ropi Hefa i wiki kaha o ia o katopa aho anima ko i whalaite o wiki kaha o pea i he tohonaki ko ia wiki ki toa Novema aho wā ia ko kere mete waha i luia ko e whiawhi tohonaki ia o le rei peke pongpong sāpate whae pea no whakeka wai pe ai ki mea toko ni ko te teo e family whahonga i aki mea mai ko e kore pia me ngai family tuku mai maha mo loto mahu whaki e taim whangata a koe ni koe mawai taim e mamai e hoko pe ho mo loto koe whanonga koe ring lolo i e ngai loto o whangata ka maa ngai loto whare koe ni mo ngai aptanga mamai koe ni o ta whanga ai ngai whangata a koe ni loto mahu whaki atu ki ati mo toko toa tau kore pe ki o toa mawhi e ne whapulpulu a ki a ngai whamelini ai nonga mo whia maari e taimo e mawai, taimo e mamahi, taimo e whaingata. Tau hangi e koe lawa sope mea ni te awe pe a lelei e awe e koe tau tari ko tau pe ai mea ko tau pe e taimo whaingata tau ilo pe koe ko tau apu mauen ko tau mofu pa taimo pe tau loto pe whai pe o tau lere taha i ngahi whatongia ko tau pe ko o mahi e ki ki tau whahau koe maman koe ni koe a ngai ni koe wholau ka malo atu pia koe polokalama ina koe mental health inner wellness ko ngahi feelings mo yanga ngahi ongo koe nana e kamata ake a polokalama ma wha malo atu ki a Sala ka ma a Scarlett ka ongo master ongo specialist ia and thank you so much, Sala and Scarlett, for your expertise and know your feelings to share with our Pacific Islanders community and everyone else. Finimotok faho a ko Silvia Fatima Taimi aho mi he leo Pacific South the Voice of South Pacific pe foki kia te vita una hefa ko ensini ia ai retio pe a una faho ko fok my live stream kia ha ka toanga pe ko ha whainga mea, ke wahi a te ngai ata, ki family, ke turi ke whae kolope, o kai ke ngata pe hene DJ, to lere mai live stream, to lere whoki pa moi printing, o ngai t-shirt ka pa mo whe mau, ha mo mea ke tā, o ne whahoko katoa ngai whatongia koe ni. Until then, thank you everyone.